Ahead on this second hour of American Sunrise, French President Emmanuel Macron and British Prime Minister Keir Starmer are among a long list of global leaders joining Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in Washington, D.C. for today's meeting with President Trump at the White House. We'll have details on who will be in attendance, also what's on the agenda, and why those European leaders felt that it was important for them to join today's conversation. Plus, Brian Glenn joining us to break it all down. The China threat. After the Trump-Putin meeting in Alaska, the CCP waits and watches. So what's their takeaway about the U.S. strength and President Trump's negotiation power on the world stage? Gordon Chang will join us with analysis and reaction. And then later, red states are joining President Trump's fight against crime in Washington, D.C. West Virginia, South Carolina, and Ohio all sending National Guard troops to the nation's capital to help take back America's streets. The details on that story and so much more right now on this second hour of American Sunrise.
Good morning, America.
Welcome to American Sunrise.
Whether it's culture,
we have breaking news to share with you.
Politics,
President Trump is joining us live now from Florida.
we've got you covered.
This is what it looks like to be a patriot.
We have to protect the American family.
The American dream is still alive.
I'm David Brody.
I'm Terrence.
And I'm Dr. Gina.
Welcome back to this second hour of American Sunrise. I'm Terrence Bates coming to you from our Denver newsroom. Joining us in our Washington, D.C. bureau, Brian Glenn. He, of course, is our chief White House correspondent. Emily Finn, sitting in for Dr. Gina in West Palm Beach. Lady and gentleman, good morning to both of you. Let's just get right to the big story of the day. President Trump is going to be focusing on peace. It is his mission, peace specifically between Russia and Ukraine. He's going to be meeting with a number of leaders at the White House today. 47 set to host Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Zelensky is going to be escorted by a delegation of European leaders, including German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, French President Emmanuel Macron, and British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Zelensky's plus ones, by the way, say that they are joining the conversation to present a united front as President Trump continues to broker what now looks more like a peace deal than a ceasefire deal. Emily, stand by because we also want to talk to you. But Brian, I want to start with you. What are your sources at the White House saying about expectations for today's meeting and how all of this is ultimately going to go down?
Yeah, good morning, Terrence. Let me go over a little bit of the timeline today, what you can expect. As you say, you've got not only Zelensky, but others coming. It all starts at 12 o'clock. That's when the European leaders will arrive at the White House. President Zelensky arrives at 1 o'clock. Now, 15 minutes later, you're going to have a bilateral meeting between President Trump and President Zelensky in the Oval Office. That will last who knows how long. Later, at about 2:15, there is also going to be participates in what they call a family photo. That's going to take place in the Cross Hall, and that's with the European leaders and President Trump. And a little bit later, at 3 o'clock, that's when you're going to see a multilateral meeting with European leaders. So it's going to be a very busy day. So you want to make sure you're watching us between 1 and probably 5 o'clock today. I think those 4 hours is going to be nonstop talks with President Trump, Zelensky, and those European leaders.
Question, though, I think that most people have is, will there be a peace deal at the end of the day, or is it just another conversation?
Well, I think it's taking a step towards that deal. You know, a lot of critics thought the meeting in Alaska was not as helpful. A lot of people on the left say that. President Trump says it was absolutely beneficial, and they was taking a foot forward. I think the next, from what I'm hearing, sources say that if this goes well, if we can all agree, and the European leaders and Zelensky can come together with President Trump and agree for the next step, you could possibly see a trilateral meeting at the end of this week. Now, location is still being discussed, but that would be ultimately the end goal, is to get all three, Zelensky, Putin, and Trump, all together to finally hammer and sign this peace treaty out. But we're the second step, in which I would think the third, so we're getting close.
All right. Emily and Brian, let's broaden the scope a little bit. Joining us now, geopolitical strategist and retired Lieutenant Colonel Darren Gobb. He's a U.S. Army veteran, a Black Hawk helicopter pilot, and a battalion commander. Good to see you, Darren. How are you, sir?
Hey, I'm doing well. Good morning. Thanks for having me.
All right. So I guess the $1 million question, I hate to come back to it, but the $1 million question is what's going to come of today's meeting? The fact that we've gotten here, I guess, is a victory of sorts, but the ultimate goal is peace. What are your expectations for today and today's meeting being a step towards peace, if you will?
Yeah, I've got a couple expectations, or at least hopes, and a couple concerns too. One of them, I don't think you're going to walk away from today with a signed document. I think you're going to see this as the setting the stage for the next one. And best case is the next one is where you get something signed. I think anybody reasonable would love to see something happen as soon as possible. But until you get both sides agreeing to things, even a verbal, at least initially, you're not going to necessarily get there. So stage two, maybe, of stage three, as it has been mentioned, and looking forward to that. I'll be also curious as to the relationships between the European leaders, specifically Zelensky and Trump, and whether those European leaders act as an actual unified front for something positive, or whether or not they're going to bring in some preconceived notions and act in a manner that actually and would unfortunately push this war even further and longer down the road. And that's not something I hope for, but it is something I've kind of learned to expect. Right, unfortunately, for many of the European leaders, they seem to be very happy with this war continuing and not with it ending. Mm-hmm. So what's their unified front for, or what is it against? That remains to be seen.
Talk to us a bit more about the role that those European leaders are going to play during this meeting at the White House between Trump and Zelensky today. I mean, the term too many cooks in the kitchen kind of comes to my mind. Could this complicate things a little bit more to have so many leaders all in the same room?
It could. And so the question then becomes, what did, like, Ursula von der Leyen and Zelensky talk about in Brussels before they even came here? What is their strategy, their game plan, the end state that they're looking for? And is it a positive one, or could it be a negative one? I think the best thing that can happen is something very positive occurs in the one-on-one discussion between Trump and Zelensky before you get to the European leaders mixing in amongst the rest of it. I know they think they're there for various reasons, and the media, different media is all over the reasons why they're there. I know they were invited. So I guess, to me, I want to see whether or not that's going to be a positive thing, because we need some of them on board to immediately agree to potential terms for a peace deal, or whether or not they're going to stand in the way of that.
All right, we're going to shift gears here domestically. D.C. lawlessness, 3 Republican-led states to send hundreds of National Guard troops right here to our nation's capital. What message does that send, I think, to citizens? I want us to shift more of our attention on keeping our country safe and cleaning up our streets. But is this a good thing that we're seeing states come together to send their resources to right here in Washington, D.C.?
Ultimately, I think it is a very good thing, because it's sadly what it's demonstrating is just the general incompetence of people like Mayor Bowser in D.C. and their inability or lack of a desire to even do their basic functions right for themselves and for the people who live there. States recognize what the example is that is getting set in D.C. right now and could be set elsewhere, because when they see homeless encampments cleaned up, they see the kind of criminals that have been arrested and incarcerated, what they were capable of doing, they're going to be like, see, all you have to do is actually focus on doing the basics of our jobs when it comes to keeping the peace in our cities and our local communities. So let's support that in D.C. and maybe make that back to the shining city on a hill that it's supposed to be. And after we do that, maybe we can move elsewhere and do the same thing. Be cautious of the precedent, because what can happen positive now can be done for negative by future presidents if we go down the road of electing someone like a Biden again. But acknowledging the fact that it is desperately needed now, and if you talk to the people of D.C., and I'm sure you have as well, they're very happy to see what's getting cleaned up, despite all the usual protesters, and it seems like they have nothing else to do.
You touched on my next
if I could
question.
say real quickly,
Go ahead, Brian. Go ahead, and then I'll follow up, please.
I was going to say, Terrence, real quickly, yesterday, Margie Taylor Greene and myself walked around D.C. And let me tell you something. If you can walk around this city with MTG and not get attacked, that's a safer city. I'm just saying, it's working.
Fair point. I want to follow up on your statement. You said, be careful of the precedent, which kind of leads to my next question. Washington, D.C. is a unique case study, if you will, in that President Trump has authority in the district to deploy the military. There are questions about, or the National Guard. There are questions about whether he would have similar authority in other states and other major cities. What are your potential concerns, if any, about the precedent that this sets?
Yeah, and I want to emphasize the fact that this is the right thing that needs to happen right now in this situation in D.C. And it may actually be the right thing to happen around potentially federal buildings and institutions in other cities. Let's just use Chicago for an example. I'd be all for everything that can possibly be done to clean up places like Chicago. But let's just say that, the devil that you live with today is somebody you could have someone different tomorrow. This is great today. Tomorrow, let's just say you've got a Biden or a Kamala Harris type of person in the White House who finds a reason to use the same federal powers to take over D.C. and do something extremely negative. And if the precedent is set where you can do that in other cities, now what you've got is the ability of federal overreach to do things that are extraordinarily negative. So I'm comfortable with it now because of who's in charge and who's doing it and how they're doing it. But I think we just have to make sure that we acknowledge that risk and account for it in some way.
All right, Lieutenant Colonel Darren Gobb, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate you joining American Sunrise.
Yeah, thanks.
So
Have a good morning.
Coming up, President Trump says Chinese President Xi Jinping is promising his military will not invade Taiwan while Trump is in office. We'll show you those remarks from the president and discuss what it means for U.S.-China relations. And later, it was a magazine that became a lifestyle. Now Playboy is moving from Los Angeles to Miami Beach. But why? Find out when American Sunrise returns. We'll be right back.